Welcome to the Chicago Booth Big Data and Analytic Roundtable. This is intended as a forum for people that are, from Chicago Booth or like-minded people in the community. We're focused on big data and analytics, but not talking about, as Mash was talking about, we don't focus on the Python code or the R code or any of that. We're at a higher level. We're looking at how do we solve problems with these tools and techniques? How do we get to something that the business can actually use? And we can talk about that at that level. As far as I can tell, we're one of very few groups that does it at that level. Most like to sit down and play with code. So we're a little bit higher level than that. We right now have over 4,000 people in our meetup group. We have a mailing list, a Chicago Booth mailing list of over 275 members. And we've done over 47 presentations. We started back in August 2014. Yes, big data was big even back then. It's been many years, believe it or not, and things are going. We do have, on the Chicago Booth side, many of our roundtables have been recorded, so you can go back and look at the videos. So if there's specific topics that are of interest to you, you can see the videos of those things that were done. And we have a YouTube channel for those things that we've started more recently. We've been loading them up, recording them on Zoom and loading them up on our YouTube channel. So you can look at it there. Just look for Chicago Booth Big Data and Analytic Roundtable. You'll find that YouTube channel, and I'll put that in the chat along the way here. I wanted to point out that this is all about you, about the people that attend this. If you've got ideas about who you want to speak, if you've got a speaker, if you want to speak or have an idea or want to try a different format, I'm more than willing to listen, more than willing to try just about anything to see what we can do. I think we were talking earlier when this got started that you're really looking for creative ways to use Zoom to do things to make this much more interesting. And also along with the fact that you're involved, you're part of this, spread the word. Let people know that this is going on, especially if you like it. Get the word out for us. And you can also volunteer. We have committees. We've got a program committee that does look for the speakers and sets up the speakers. We've got logistics committee that isn't doing much, but once we get back in person, we have check-ins and we work with Gleacher Center. We have, as many of you or some of you who have been here before know, we usually have a drink ticket. So, right now you have to have your own drink ticket and bring it in yourself. But when we get back to Gleacher Center, we'll have drinks and appetizers that we kind of pull together as well. Okay. I want to let you know that we've got something set up for next month. It's going to pop up literally, I think, either later tonight or tomorrow. We've got Rebecca Popp coming in and talking about data storytelling. It's a topic that I've thought about a lot, and I found somebody that does a really good job of it. So I'm looking forward to her coming in and doing that. Okay. And with that, I'm going to go to two things that I'd like to talk about. And I do this every time we meet. One is want to understand how the market is going out there. Do any of you have recs open? You're looking for data scientists, and be aware that there might be a clamor of those people responding back very quickly, maybe in chat or somehow looking for those jobs. But anybody have any open recs where they're looking for big data and analytic type people right now? And while people are thinking about that, Heidi, did you hear from Duane yet, or?
While she gets her answer together, my name's Kelton. I'm also with Wavicle.
Okay.
I know that our company is looking for strategic hires within the data science community. So if you're someone who has some sort of like niche knowledge in like natural language processing or image analysis, or if you're just a general excellent data scientist, I'd encourage you to give us to shoot an application over. We may not have an open position listed on the website because we're only looking for like strategic hires, but I'd encourage you to get in touch anyway.
Okay. Kelvin, can I ask you to drop just the website, or if there's a specific site, or if they need to email you or whatever it is, put something in the chat so people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll also put my email in there in case that would be helpful.
And we've got a name with a name and face. We got a face with the name.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually keep my camera off if I can help it, but I figure with so many people.
And now they know what you look like. They'll see you and corner you.
Yeah, the jigs up. They know I'm in sweatpants.
Yes. Yes, I always talk about that. I'm in what's called virtual business casual. I am wearing a pair of gym shorts. Although I've got a nice shirt on, it's gym shorts at the waist down. So I'm comfortable, but I look nice.
Yep, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah. Thanks, Kelvin. That's very good. Anybody else have any recs they'd like to talk about? Okay. The other thing I like to bring up is, are there other events going on out there that would be of interest to this group? Sometimes people have insights into things going on that not everybody does know about. And I've got a couple that I'll bring up right away as others are preparing. And I know Robin's going to chime in for me on one. But currently INFORMS, the Institute for Operations Research and Management Science, and they need to change their name because they've been around a long time, and that's the way things were used to be talked about. It's their analytics, basically. But their annual meeting is going on this week. I think they actually had the keynote presentations today, or I know Linda Birch was doing a presentation today for them. And the other one that I have is the Cinematic Scientific Visualization meetup is going to be occurring on November 18th. So coming up pretty soon. And I'm attending that, and the gentleman that runs that noticed that and asked that I mention that here. So maybe not exactly big data and analytics, but related on the visualization side of things. Okay, and then Robin, you had a meeting you were going to mention?
Yes, next Friday there's the annual conference, which, needless to say, this year is virtual, but the Chicago chapter of the American Statistical Association, and the topic is natural language processing. And I think there are four speakers, like 4 45-minute chunks, with some breaks in the middle.
Yes, and I am a member of the CCASA, and the way every group is a little bit different. I characterize them as maybe a little bit more academic, more detail oriented on things. So when they talk about, when they're going to talk about natural language processing, it's going to be more technical than what we would.
Yes.
And again, probably not as much from the code perspective, but from the, as the name implies, more the statistics, the methodologies behind the scenes, so to say. Okay. And Mash, you mentioned one too, and I think you put it in the chat. Can you just bring that up, the Pi Data?
Sure, it's on the chat, and this is Pi Data is another large data science conference. They have these in different cities. I was the Pi Data organizer for Miami a couple of years ago, and it'll last usually for about 2 or 3 days. Pi Data Global this time is virtual, and it's going on for about 5 days. And what all of the presenters have done is, for instance, the tutorials have been turned into edX style courses, and they do it hands-on, including getting the Jupyter notebooks, all the code, everything operationalized, put into Binder and on GitHub, so you can copy the code down and follow along on your own, and so on. And there are some really, really great cutting edge, bleeding edge models and methods and frameworks that are discussed, including natural language processing, if that seems to be the common thread that everybody's into right now.
So a lot of this is going to, Duane, you're speaking at an amazing time. Everybody's talking about natural language processing. So you're setting this up for everyone to get into this, get informed and get excited about it. Okay, so let me ask one more time, anything else, any other events that people know about that we should, as a group, be aware of? Okay, so then what I'd like to do is introduce Duane Lyons, and I'll let him do more of an introduction of himself and his topic. But at this point, we'll check out, make sure that you can share your screen, and we'll let you get going and get us all excited about natural language processing. All right, you'll need to unmute.
Sorry. Thanks, Roger, and I hope everybody can hear me okay.
Yes, perfect.
I'll go ahead and share my screen. And let me know if you can see this.
Yes, I can see it. It's come up.
Great. So yeah, so real quickly, as everybody knows, I'm Duane Lyons, and I think, Roger, what we spoke about earlier was that from a standpoint of when people have questions, just feel free to interrupt and ask the question throughout the discussion. I might not always see if there's something in the chat, so might be difficult for me to multitask sometimes. So I'll try to make sure that I pause frequently enough so it's easy to be interrupted here. But real quickly, so a little bit about Wavicle. Myself and Calvin, who's one of our data scientists, is on, as well as Heidi. But I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but Wavicle, we're a consulting systems integrator. We're headquartered here in Chicago. We've been around for almost a decade. We have about 250 employees. So we have offices here, Montreal, as well as offshore in India, in Coimbatore. And we have about a 50-50 split between US and offshore. And we're 100% focused in the data and analytics space. So we help clients from upfront project roadmap and strategies and analytics business cases, all the way through to implementation. And then, our implementation work focuses on in a couple areas. One area is all the hardcore data architecture and data engineering, all the plumbing, and so to speak, which is primarily cloud-based. So the majority of the work we do is at AWS and Azure. And then the other two big chunks of our work is in the descriptive and the predictive analytics space. And so tonight, we'll talk primarily about a subset of what we do in the predictive analytics space, which is primarily focused on text analytics. And even more specifically, from a practical example, we'll talk about a lot of the stuff that we've been doing in the voice of customer space, customer feedback across industries. And I'm based here in Chicago. So that's all about Wavicle. I'll try to keep the sales stuff to a minimum. Like I mentioned before, we're going to probably, even though, we obviously want to talk about whatever people are interested related to text analytics in general. A lot of the stuff that we'll talk about that's more practical and tangible is related to the voice of the customer space. And so this is, a quote from J. Willard Marriott. I think there's some other quotes from him as well, but one of the other interesting things about Marriott, which is not this quote, is that Marriott used to have a philosophy. I'm sure they still have it, but it used to be that they used to make it as easy as possible for customers to express their dissatisfaction, and they used to try to make it such that you could, even before the digital age, complain as at many points in the journey as possible, because their theory was that the more you do a good job of turning a dissatisfied customer into a satisfied customer, that statistically speaking, they become one of your most loyal customers. And anyway, as it relates to customer feedback, what we've generally seen is what are the real business benefits of customer feedback. So you can reduce the amount of churn you have within your customer base by doing a better job of addressing their issues. Obviously, kind of the inverse of that is you improve loyalty. One of the other interesting areas we've seen companies use customer feedback or CSAT, customer SAT processes, is actually taking the results of CSAT and actually having it be an input into your marketing, especially on the digital side, and using it to do things like improving your segment design, doing it to also fine tune what your messages and offers are going to be. Companies can do it to identify product opportunities and so on. And then, lastly, you can also use it to identify issues that are occurring operationally. So, if you're a restaurant, being able to quickly identify, when, for example, a topical term now is being able to quickly identify when staff at a particular location are maybe not in compliance with safety protocol from the standpoint of wearing masks or other types of PPE. What we found is that being able to understand consumer feedback, it's applicable across a lot of industries. And obviously the bigger the organization, the more feedback you're getting, the more important it is to kind of have the right systems in place to be able to do it, right? Like, you don't necessarily need a advanced system with NLP capabilities if you're getting 50 reviews a day, but if you're a large QSR that might be in 80 to 100 countries, and you're getting maybe a 250,000 CSAT surveys filled out a day or more, you probably would have a little bit of difficulty working through those manually every day, right? And just to take a step back too, right? I'm going to walk through some slides and talk about our experiences using NLP and text analytics to solve the problem related to voice of customer. And then just to make it a little bit more concrete at the end, we'll actually walk through a demo of a solution that we've built that helps people do the analyze step. But when we think about voice of customer, we generally and our customers look at it this way too. We kind of look at it along three main pillars. One, and I know there's a couple things in the chat, so I'm sorry, I'm having trouble getting the chat to come up here. Okay.
I will watch the chat for you.
Okay, cool. Okay, so if there's a question, just jump in.
Okay.
Generally speaking, when organizations think about a formal process for voice of customer, we think about it in three kind of dimensions or steps. The first one is collecting, right? Obviously, if you can't collect feedback, you can't analyze it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. We're going to probably talk a lot about the analyze, and we'll go through some examples of that later to help understand kind of what we've learned from our experience. And then lastly, there's the ability to take action on it, right? Which is admittedly probably the area where most companies are the least mature these days, and there's still a lot of opportunity. There's also a lot of opportunities in the analyze phase as well. And then, you think about it, right? When we talk about collecting, right? It's really how do you optimize your ability to collect and integrate that data? How do you analyze it, and how do you take action, right? So when you think about collecting, I'm not just going to read through these, but things like, are you able to collect feedback at every transaction? So when someone comes into your restaurant, when they come into your retail location, when they buy from you online, when you address their service issue, or when you deliver something to them, right? Being able to, at those distinct points in the journey. And then there's a lot of other sources, social data, but there's even ones that are unconventional. For example, using a restaurant example, being able to actually take the two-way voice conversations that might occur through a drive-through and doing voice to text conversion on that, and then being able to analyze that and, for example, try to understand the level of satisfaction with the customer as it relates to the actual order process as well. And then another thing about collecting feedback that we see is that you want to think through things like, are you just asking standard questions with things from highly satisfied to highly dissatisfied? Or are you asking, for open-ended feedback? And, what we've generally found for a variety of reasons is that kind of the best practice is to do both, because the standard questions are good in that it gives you a baseline for benchmarking and comparisons over time. But what's nice about the open-ended feedback is that you can never ask enough questions with standard answers to cover all the topics you might be interested in. And, you also have scenarios where topics come up that you might not have even thought about until they occur. So for example, until the pandemic hit, I'm pretty sure, most retailer or restaurant-focused CSAT processes, weren't necessarily thinking about safety and social distancing and employees wearing masks and gloves, right? So those are the kind of things that if you know how to do it, you can pull that out of textual data that you're going to get from, open-ended comments, right? And then obviously, from an analysis standpoint, you want to make sure that, you're being able to analyze data from different touch points. So it's not uncommon when we work with clients that, they may have all their social data being analyzed in one environment, all their CSAT data might be being analyzed in another environment. Data from a call center might be being analyzed in another environment, and there's no kind of integrated holistic approach to analyzing all that, which makes it hard to really, understand what's going on enterprise-wide. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there. Number one, take a drink, and then number two, see if there's any questions.
There was nothing on the chat, just to let you know. There was stuff coming in, but it was mostly from me and others just putting up notes about other things we were talking about. I want to make one point
Sure.
from my experience, just to lay this out. So there is this need to find the data and analyze the data and look at it, but there's still a piece in there, and maybe you're going to get to it, but actually doing something with it. And I think you're getting to the point where, number one, you just have to have it all together so you can look at it.
Yep.
But until you actually do something with it, it doesn't help. And
correct.
A friend of mine, the chief marketing officer at Kraft Heinz, that was actually Kraft at the time, set up something they called Looking Glass, which was watching social media. And all they were doing for the longest time was just looking at information coming in, looking and analyzing. And she got a feedback on something that was coming in about people were upset that they couldn't get a hold of Velveeta to make their secret Super Bowl recipes. There was a manufacturing problem, and they were seeing this being portrayed on social media, and they just had the analysis that said that this was a problem. And she, with her team at that point, decided to turn it into a plus. And literally got out ahead of it and was identifying stores, locations that had Velveeta in stock and making that available to the general public. So rather than that being a hit to the brand at the time, to Velveeta, it actually ended up being, people got really excited about Velveeta, and they actually had a big bump in brand recognition around Velveeta for what they did with the information, with the analysis that they had. So, all right, I'll be quiet now. You've had a chance.
That's a great example, right? And as we go through this, hopefully we'll make sure that we hit on a few examples of how the information is actually leveraged for business benefit as well, right? But one of the things we wanted to do is just talk through, when we do the analysis of this open-ended feedback, how do you do it in such a way so that you're making sure that you can get the most insight as possible from that data, right? And I see a question here about how easy it is to interface it with Tableau or other visualization tools, and we'll actually address that later when we walk through the demo, because the demo that we'll show, which shows how someone would use a tool like this to make some business decisions, that front end is actually written in Tableau. But you could use any front end tool that you would want, to be honest. So this is a restaurant example. And in this example, the feedback that the restaurant obtained from the customer via a customer satisfaction process was, I ordered a burger, it was good, the fries were cold. This is actually a little simpler than most feedback. Most feedback is actually a little longer than this as far as the total number of characters that we would see with most QSRs. And the first thing that jumps out is when you're going to analyze this and you're trying to do things like sentiment and assigning it to topics, which is really a classification algorithm. Maybe you want to try to extract the menu items as well. It's not really one comment, it's actually 3 comments, right? And then the other thing that jumps out is that you have to really understand what's being said. So we typically, when we analyze these comments, what I'm going to talk through here is a couple of steps we go through. And if you think about it, right, before these steps, you start with millions of comments that the only way you can really gain any insight out of them is you would have to read through them and then use that to figure something out. Ideally, as a result of these steps that we go through, we basically take these comments, we break them down, we attribute them, and we give them tags so that they're much easier to query. And you can quickly, within 2 or 3 clicks, get to a point where you understand, what is good and what is bad within a specific topic, right? And you can do it with a variety of ways to slice and dice it. So the first thing we do, step 1, is we do this thing called co-referencing, which is a pretty common technique. And really what we're doing here is we're figuring out what the word "it" means, right? Because if you look at this, it was good. I don't know if that's the restaurant, the bathroom, the drive-through, but because of the placement in the sentence structure, I'm able to figure out that there's a high probability that what it really means is the burger, and the burger is really a hamburger. So that's the very first thing we do with every comment is we do that thing called co-referencing, is we basically, convert the pronouns, I think, like it into the hamburger, right? That's step number 1. Step number 2, and this is probably one of the most important steps, is we actually break the comment down into subcomments using NLP processing. And so instead of analyzing one comment, we break it into 3. So we end up with, I ordered a burger as a comment, it was good as a comment, and then the fries were cold as a comment. And so from this point forward, the way we analyze these comments will all be done independently. We'll know that they're related because they're part of the same comment, but the reality is if you would have, say, done sentiment analysis on that original comment, how manual or automated the creation? Okay, so that's a good question, and I'll address it when I get through this. If you would do, say, for example, sentiment analysis on that original comment, you would most likely come back with mixed, because the first comment, I ordered a burger, is neutral, and that's a very factual statement. It was good is obviously positive, and the fries were cold. We'll say that's negative, but syntactically it's neutral. But we just happen to know that if fries were cold, that's not good. Whereas if the shake was cold, that is good, right? But so by breaking it down, now we analyze each of these independently. And then the next thing that occurs is we actually figure out the sentiment and we do what's called topic assignment. So, within the restaurant industry, where there's about 20 to 30 different topics that most QSRs are interested in. So the I ordered a burger, we use blue for neutral. I don't know why we use blue, but we use blue. So I ordered a burger is just a very factual statement. So it's neutral. And we assign that to a category or a topic of order accuracy. It was good, that's green, that's good. We assign that to a topic called food taste. And then the fries were cold, we assign that to negative sentiment. and we assign that to a topic of food temperature. So at this point, we've now, basically decomposed this sentence or the original comment. We've broken it down into 3, and then we know that for one of the subcomments, it's neutral, it's to order accuracy. Another one is positive, it's to food taste. And the third comment is negative, and it's to the category of food temp. And then the last thing we do is, whether it's, in the case of a restaurant, we're extracting the menu items, because that's something that people want to know about generally when they're doing analysis. And so if you were not a restaurant, it would be maybe products you sell. And so by the time we're done, if you think about it, you start with those comments that would require you to just manually analyze them. And what we end up with is we know for every comment, we know what the subcomments were, we know what the sentiment was of each subcomment, we know what topics or categories were assigned to each subcomment, and we also know the menu items. And now that you've got all those identified, now it becomes much easier for either a corporate insights analyst or even a subset of the information that you might put out to a GM or a franchisee or an operator, and giving them data just about their restaurant location. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there and see if there's any questions. Okay. There was a question about how automated that whole process is to do co-referencing, I believe.
Yep.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So the short answer is that whole process end to end is automated, right? So we start with the comment, and we will do the co-referencing. We will then do the breaking the comments into subcomments. And then after the comments are broken into subcomments, then we calculate sentiment. We determine the categories or topics, which is done via a custom classification algorithm. And then lastly, we extract the menu items. And so that whole thing is done in an automated pipeline that runs end to end. And then we apply that, or we can apply that to basically any of the inputs, right? Whether it's social data, whether it's CSAT data, whether it's data coming from a call center, or other sources as well. Does that answer that question?
Okay. It sounds like it does, or at least there's no feedback on that.
Okay.
Yes, it does. He's responded back. Okay. I have a quick one too.
Sure.
Realistically, how many of those categories, topics, and product items can you have? Is there a practical limit, or is there no real limit to that?
So that's a good question. So let me answer first for the topics or categories that you assign the subcomments to. What's probably more important than the number of categories is the amount of training data that we can generate to train the classification model. So, if ideally you would want at least 100 or so comments assigned to each classification or each label, so that we can get I don't want to use the word accuracy because that's misleading, but so that we can get an acceptable model performance. So I think now the other thing practically related to the number of categories is that what we've seen is that when you get too many, the problem is that there just tends to be, even with the SMEs that are developing the training data, there tends to be the lines between, like, for example, the line between food temperature and food taste is a very fine line, right? And you may have different SMEs that are creating training data that put the same comment in different categories, right? So, I would say generally, the more you can make sure that your categories are mutually exclusive, the better off you'll be with regards to the classification model being more accurate, right?
Right. So you're trying to get to a MISI setup, so mutually exclusive, completely exhaustive, as best you can, but not in, so no overlaps is kind of the key. Or
that's the perfect case, but it's never reality. There's always going to be overlap, and it's also never going to. The algorithm is going to make mistakes, right? It's going to, it's not going to always assign every sub comment to the right topic, right?
Yep. Okay. All right.
And now you would ask the second question about in there too. What was the second one?
The number of items.
Yeah. So that's so in theory, it doesn't matter. The way we currently do that behind the scenes is that we leverage a master list of the items. Now, if you were doing this for an e-commerce retailer that had 50,000 items, that might get a little more complicated. The majority of the examples that we can generally talk to are QSR and quick serve restaurants, excuse me. And generally there, you're not going to have, more than 50 to 100 menu items at a time. When you add in multiple geographies, that number might get a little bigger. But if you get to an e-commerce environment where you got tens of thousands of items, that could get a little trickier.
Yeah, and I'll supplement that with so I'll go to the quick serve restaurant and I'll do so I've got a burger, a cheeseburger, a quarter pounder with cheese. I got a Big Mac. Do you tend to divvy those out? Do you actually call those separate items? Do you end up classifying those items as just burgers?
Ideally, we would identify those as different menu items. It depends on what is actually being said in the comments. If someone just says burger, you're not really sure whether they're talking about, which one they're talking about, right? But ideally, as much as possible, we would want to be able to differentiate between the various styles of a hamburger.
Okay. So, and I'll push. So is there like a hierarchy then? So if I can't bucket it as a Big Mac, I bucket it as a burger, and burgers are Big Macs, quarter pounders, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct. Yeah. And then behind the scenes, generally, one of the data sources that we would have is, a master list of the items and like a global menu item hierarchy as well. Okay. So then, if we can match up to any particular item on the global menu hierarchy, then, what people can start doing is doing analysis where they say, don't give me, I don't want to see all the sentiment just about, chicken sandwiches, but I want to see, sentiment about everything where the protein is chicken.
Okay.
Right. Okay. One other challenge we sometimes have in the QSR space is that QSRs where a food item is in the name, like Pizza Hut, Taco Bell. We sometimes think that when people are talking about the brand, they're saying something positive or negative about Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, that they're actually talking about a menu item called a pizza or a taco, right?
Okay.
So it's not perfect, right? Did I answer those questions?
Yes, very good.
Okay, I see something in the chat. Okay, I think we've addressed that. Okay, so there was a question earlier about, how do we make it easy to interface with a tool like Tableau? So I'm actually gonna go ahead and show a demo of that actually. And let me start sharing my screen again. And let me know if you can see this.
We can see it.
Okay, great. So, so this is actually, based on that process I talked about earlier, to have an environment where we can do demos and kind of show this to prospective clients and how we do the analysis of this voice of customer. What we've done is we've taken a number of fast food brands. In this case, it's Burger King, KFC. Food Lion shouldn't be in there. That's a grocery chain. Basically, all the Yum brands: KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, Starbucks Reserve, and then the brands that roll up to what's called RBI, which includes Burger King, Tim Hortons, Popeyes, and we've sourced Yelp reviews for about 10 to 15 restaurant locations each for each of those brands. So, when you look at this user interface, right, you can pick what's your data source. So in this case, our data source is Yelp, but it could be internal CSAT, it could be social data. Right now, the country is all US. The restaurant name, for example, I'm going to walk through. I'm actually going to just focus on Pizza Hut. And then you can also pick a specific restaurant location. So since we're focused on Pizza Hut, now I can pick, one of the specific Pizza Hut locations, but I'm not going to do that yet. And then the categories are these things here, right? So, earlier when we talked about assigning subcomments to topics, well, one topic you can assign them to is food temperature. Another one is freshness of the food. Another is competitor mention. Sometimes people come and, make comments and they'll compare you to a competitor. How food satisfaction, location convenience, brand satisfaction, pricing, customer service, speed of service, drive-through, atmosphere, accuracy of order. What's the overall cleanliness, portion size, right? These are the various different categories that we've defined. And basically, every sub-comment gets assigned to one or more of these topics. So in this example, real quickly, what I'm going to show you is an example for Pizza. So let's say I work for Pizza Hut, and I have decided that I want to understand what category do people have the most negative feedback about. So I'm going to sort this list by negative sentiment, and give it a second here. It'll refresh, and now what you'll see is so the sentiment, just to provide a little perspective, that can be either really good, which is a positive 100, or it can be really bad, which is negative 100. And so for red 65, that's pretty bad. So what this is telling us is for Pizza Hut, where we had 289 customer feedback comments, 3,060 sub-comments. Yelp comments tend to be pretty verbose. So the average comment got broken down into more than 10 sub-comments based on the NLP processing and that logic I told you about earlier. But when we look at this and we see, well, cleanliness is the most negative topic. So I just click on cleanliness, and now this is going to take me to a drill down where I'm just focused on cleanliness. And now when you look at the screen, you still have the same filters across the top, but then you have a variety of visualizations, and all of the visualizations are such that you can, if you click on one, the rest of the screen is filtered by it. So I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to click on the red part of the pie chart here. That's just the negative. And now the rest of the screen will be filtered on that. And so now, a very common analysis path is that I'm focused on Pizza Hut, I'm focused on cleanliness, and I look at things and say, okay, the people are talking about the floor. So at this point, an analyst might actually start looking through, the individual comments and just using that as a way to get a little bit of anecdotal knowledge. And the thing is, when you actually go to an individual comment and you hover, you hold the mouse over it, what comes up in the mouse in the tooltip is the entire original comment, and what you're seeing, originally is just the sub comment. So you see things like pick up the garbage, don't care about the quality or cleanliness of their shop. Line was messy, right? Things like that, right? So what I've been able to do here, right, with 2 clicks is I was able to, on the original screen, pick Pizza Hut. I was able to sort by, negative sentiment, focus on then cleanliness, click on that, and then get to this screen. And then if I wanted to zero down even more onto one location, I could, for example, pick a restaurant like at 951 Howard Street. And obviously the data set's going to be a lot smaller now. We're probably only talking about, 6 or 7 comments, but now I'm now down to the level of detail where I'm looking at feedback for Pizza Hut, the category of cleanliness, only the negative feedback at one specific location. And, then I can actually, at this point, if I was, say, the manager or the GM or the franchisee that owns this location, I could look at these specific, locations, right? I'll go ahead and stop there and see if anybody has any questions. I hope that addresses the question of, how easy is it to display this information that comes as a result of what we call our text analytics pipeline and displaying it in a tool like Tableau.
And just to say this out loud, what I like is that all of this insight can be tied directly back to the original input. So I can always track it back. I've got an audit trail, so to say. That's kind of, it's kind of obvious, but it's just nice to say.
Correct. And then also getting back to that discussion earlier about, okay, how do people use this, right? The most practical way that this is used on a repeatable basis by QSRs is to two scenarios. One, it'll be used by a corporate insights group to answer a never-ending list of questions that they'll get from executives. So for example, one of our clients, one of their big areas of focus is speed of service through the drive-through. And if you just look at the corporate metrics that are correct, that actually talk about how long it takes a customer to get from a certain point in the drive-through to the point of actually having their food delivered to them, they've been consistently improving over the last several years. But if you look at the customer satisfaction feedback that's specific to drive-through, the customer feedback doesn't necessarily echo that, right? So, in general, no matter what that corporate metric is that's coming out of your corporate systems and telling you that, hey, drive-through is improved by 10% a year for the last 3 years, they always like to take that and then compare that to what is the customer perception, and is the customer perception changing as well? Because obviously, if customer perception isn't improving, that's many times customer perception is reality, right? Now, when you talk about the franchisees or the operators, the real value add there is to be able to get them customer feedback about their locations, within 8 to 24 hours after the feedback is actually submitted. And it allows, the franchisees to actually review this information and take action on it. Right? And one thing to add is when we think about the concept of personas, so the persona that this user interface is really designed for this demo is really that corporate insights person. The user interface that you would be seeing if you were a franchisee and you own 2 locations, it would be a little different than this, and it would be much more targeted and just showing you the data about your locations, right? Okay. Now, a different example I want to show, which is a little more positive. I'll try to end the demo with something that has a little bit more of a positive connotation. So for this one, I'm going to actually switch to my example being Starbucks. Oops, not KFC, it's Starbucks, sorry. Give me a second here, okay. For those of you who don't know, the Starbucks Reserve is actually the location on Michigan Avenue, whereas Starbucks is just all the other Starbucks locations. So now I'm focused on Starbucks. I don't really want to be trying to do Pizza Hut, okay? So now I'm looking at Starbucks versus Pizza Hut. And one thing you'll notice is probably, a little different is I'm going to also change how I'm sorting here. So Starbucks, interestingly, has the net sentiment being a lot more positive for, or positive sentiment actually being a lot more positive for a lot of categories than what you saw at Pizza Hut, which, in the grand scheme of things isn't incredibly surprising. But no offense meant to Pizza Hut or Yum Brands. But let's say I'm a person at Starbucks and I'm really focused on what can we do to improve customer service. So when I look at this, the thing I see is customer service is positive 2%, which basically means it's just a little bit better than average, right? Because 0 means you're getting as much negative feedback as you are getting positive feedback, right? So I'm going to click on customer service here. And it's going to now take me to that detail screen that was similar to the one that we had before. But now I'm only focused on Starbucks, and I'm only focused on customer service. And, unlike the Pizza Hut cleanliness one we had before, you do see a lot more green here. And, one of the interesting things you see here is one of the most common words you see is barista, right? So I'm just going to pick on that for a while, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I want to understand what is it that people are saying when they're talking about customer service as a category, and they're specifically using the word barista. So I'm going to click on the 96 for barista. And now the rest of the screen is going to be filtered. So I'm only looking at Starbucks data for the category of customer service that's positive when they're using the word barista. And you can scroll through this list and you can see the comments, but you'll see things like very nice baristas. The baristas are incredible. Mandy, the barista was golden. The baristas are such fun to talk to, right? So coming away from this, right, one of the things that I could quickly develop a hypothesis on is that that when people think about whether the customer service is good or bad, the barista is actually a critical part of it. And, and the reality is it's not just positive as well, that the baristas can also have a very negative impact. Even though they generally have a positive impact, there's obviously a lot of, negative and neutral experiences related to baristas as well, right? So if I then want to research what are the negative things people are saying about baristas, I click on the 67 that's negative for baristas. I, now wait for it to refresh for a moment here. And now, I see some less flattering comments about the baristas, right? The baristas don't seem to be too happy. I think somewhere down in here, I saw a comment about someone saying that they thought the barista was part of a prison release program. So as a result of this analysis, right, what I could come away with is saying that, okay, it's proven, right? The data supports the fact that the baristas have a critical impact on the customer experience. So, what can we start doing to actually tilt the scales even a little bit further, so that, instead of about, a little more, maybe 60% of it being positive versus negative, maybe it's a little bit more than that. But what do we do to actually tilt the scales further so that, the percentage of the feedback that we get in the customer service related to baristas is positive, right? And once again, that was analysis I was able to do with 3 or 4 clicks. And it's common of the type of analysis someone like in a corporate insights group would actually do to solve or research some type of business question that they might be trying to address. So I'll go ahead and stop there and see if there's any questions.
Let me throw a comment in. Just,
Sure.
Again, having done some of this stuff before, and back in the olden days, to do what you did to that level, other than being a specific special analysis, you'd send some people away for a week to go get the numbers and crunch it and provide a report back. It would take thousands of pages of reports to be able to go through and find that. But given you can do it interactively, you literally could be in the middle of a meeting and dig into this. That's what's really compelling to me about this, is that I can slice and dice it down to exactly what I want. And then, as I was mentioning before, have the audit trail actually go to the specific comments. That's something that nobody's ever been able to do really on looking at feedback surveys of any type.
Yeah, and another thing I can do too, right? And I'm not trying to turn this into a software product demo, right? But to your point, let's say, for example, I'm going to click all the restaurants, right? And let's say I'm going to also do all categories as well. I may have to do a revert here. Sorry. Oh, okay. Oh, but we can also do word searches across categories, right? Okay, so now I'm looking at I believe a lot of data. So I'm going to go into the word search and just type in the word COVID, right? And see who via reviews is talking about COVID. And so, okay, I must have some kind of filter set wrong here, but I'll just do a revert here. So I get a larger data set. But to your point, okay, now I want to maybe I want to skip all those steps and just, I want to see who's talking about a specific thing. And maybe that, specific thing is something related to the pandemic. So I'll just search for COVID. In this case, this should give me a few more than the prior one. And so now I got a larger data set, right? So now if you really wanted to just know what people are saying about COVID, you could actually look through these comments, right? Now, admittedly, this is probably an area where the UI could be a little better because, I don't know because I'm looking at multiple restaurant brands, I don't know whether this is a Starbucks, a Pizza Hut, a Burger King, right? But it does give you that ability to just search for, give me all the comments that are using a certain word as well, right?
Yeah.
But once again, right, the visualization's nice, but if we didn't have that pipeline process on the back end where you process those comments and you basically turn them from just a comment with text to a comment that's now fully attributed and tagged, that's really what we're doing via the user interface, right? Is we're just, via the UI, we just have a nice way to analyze all that data that's now, all those comments that have been tagged. We've basically turned the unstructured textual data into, or unqueryable textual data into textual data that you can now query to understand.
Hey, Duane, just to add some color to your work here, I think your work is absolutely amazing. It's spot on. Around 9 months ago, I built something similar for Groupon, and which is what we use today. And we initially started with just looking at our deals in our goods division to say which deals were bad or good. And then we realized that if we didn't take the sentiment, we're artificially inflating deals into relevance, giving them marketing support, but the actual deal or experience was horrible. So that's one way we used it. And then when we started to bring in all the local deals, we realized that when we put geography over it and then overlaid it by sales, the different areas which had underperforming, let's say, ratings and reviews, it could have been a new owner for a hotel, but the last 6 months it performed well. In the most recent 6 months, it was horrible. And then we started to realize that some of the trends we found by region were actually poor performing salespeople who weren't really coaching their deals or their hotels how to deliver the best experience. And so you talked about the polarity. And then the polarity of that positive, neutral, negative, we took everything that was neutral below. Even if it was neutral, we created a whole entire sales package to then go back to each individual hotel or location to kind of coach them and show them all their ratings and reviews to really teach them how to be better. So what you're doing here is absolutely spot on, man. This is exactly how we use this stuff at Groupon.
Okay. Well, thank you. Quick question. I'm assuming the source of your analysis was then customer feedback left on Groupon about the products they purchased?
Yes. We use Trustpilot, and we also use the actual review that you left on the deal on Groupon. Yes. So a combination of both.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
And then the third piece of that is when the customers would call into our phone center, then we would take that text also and throw it into this package too. So then that way it gave us a better 360 of that individual customer's experience.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
This is great work, man. I love this, man. I'm excited over here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the things that we're doing some exploration now with a few clients is we have some clients who are actually brand sellers on Amazon, if you know what that means. So they're a brand that's selling on Amazon. So as a brand that sells on Amazon, they can get access to a lot more data than a lot of sellers on Amazon do. And so as a brand seller, they get a little easier access to, say, the reviews of all their products. So we're looking to understand for certain sellers the applicability of a platform like this to actually, do that analysis of the feedback they get for their sales on Amazon, and then being able to use that as a way to then correlate to sales, right? Because if you're a brand seller on Amazon, you can typically also get sales data as well for how much of your product is sold by, I think it's by zip code of the buyer.
So you can get it all the way down to zip code.
Yeah.
Hey, if you want to pick my brain later on the Amazon stuff, I was a category director there for kitchen and wedding. It's about a $3 billion category. And I helped with the ratings program in 2016. So I could fill you in on a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
This is exciting stuff, man. You're like spot on too, man.
This is Millen McGraw, right?
Milan, yes.
Milan, sorry. Okay.
Wow,
Yeah,
man.
great.
I did my hair today for you.
Okay. That's awesome.
I'm going to throw something in again. I think with both of you, it'd be kind of interesting to see. So when you're looking at the Pizza Hut thing and the cleanliness, one thing that struck me is there is, bring out that nasty word, bias, right? Chances are if things are clean, I'm not going to comment much on that because there's an expectation it would be. The only time I'm really going to comment is if it sucks. So do you do anything with bias?
Yeah. No, we don't. We don't. Not at all. Right. That's a good point. And the short answer is no. And I think that bias is especially because for the purposes of this environment to be able to demo this, and like when we talk about this concept with people, we think it's a lot better to be able to show a demo than just show slides. Yeah. The reality is Yelp is incredibly biased, right? Yeah. So that represents a challenge there, right? I think CSAT data, where you're trying to collect feedback from every transaction, there's probably still going to be some bias there, but I think that's going to be a much more truer source of data.
Yeah. And looking at the bias, it's one more level down that you probably wouldn't want to show the account initially, is the subjectivity scores, where we were able to look at if a person leaves a 1, then it was something wrong with them, not something wrong with the actual deal. And it's a lot of evidence that we found, given that individual scores 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on if it's the person, or is the person. Man, let me explain this the right way. We looked at the subjectivity and how they left the actual text. We're able to determine if the experience was bad or if they had a bias and just didn't like the place. Yeah, it's some more stuff you could do there. Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. And there was another question that came in about, is it available in other languages? And so right now, we are in the process of ideally expanding it to over the next 12 to 24 months, Spanish, German, Italian, French, and Russian. We think that we're still early on in this process. We think that certain languages are going to be easier than others, like the Germanic languages. We're Russian, especially some of the, like if we look at Mandarin and kanji, that's going to be a little more complicated. But the short answer is it's not available now in other languages. We're to address the needs of one of our clients. All those languages I mentioned are ones we have to figure out a way to address. And another thing too about the languages is certain steps are really language independent, right? So currently our, not to be too technical about this, but our solution, the way we do the thing called co-referencing, that's custom developed by us. The way we do the sentence breakdown in the sub-comments, that's custom built by us, and that's very language specific. Now the sentiment and the classification, we're leveraging services from Amazon Web Services, a product called Comprehend. So the sentiment analysis is already available in every one of those languages, so that's easy. And then the classification model, where we assign sub-comments to topics, that actually doesn't really depend on the language. It's really just based on symbology or symbols. So, the only challenge is if it was in a language we don't understand, we can't really tell if it's doing a good job or not. So, that's a real area of focus for us right now, is the other languages. Thanks. How does it address scientific technical terminology? I'm not sure I understand the question when you say scientific technical terminology.
So, for instance, in COVID, they have, they use certain medical terms, or they use certain biochemical terms, or reagents or chemical reagents that they use, and that information is in some of their data.
Yeah. So, like if we're using a QSR example, right? What you might see in a customer's feedback is that they might mention the word COVID. They might talk about the lack of social distancing. They might talk about the fact that employees weren't wearing masks or gloves, right? So when the pandemic started, none of our clients, when you think about those topics, none of them had a topic for pandemic or COVID, right? And that's actually a good example of how, it's when you're constructing customer satisfaction surveys, that's why it's good to have open-ended feedback opportunities for your customers, because prior to COVID, you would have, as a QSR, you would have never had a standard question in your survey that says, were our employees wearing masks, or were they, practicing social distancing or encouraging social distancing for patrons in the restaurant, right? But obviously, as soon as COVID occurred and people started providing feedback about that in the open-ended comments, and so what we were able to do was to quickly, behind the scenes, we we had to basically create a new topic or a new category related to COVID or pandemic. And we had to then find some comments that had the words in them that where people were talking about that. And that basically, we assigned them to that topic. We wanted to get at least 100 examples or more. And then that ended up becoming training data that went into the classification algorithm. So to your question, you know, if we wanted to assign comments to a topic that had a lot of scientific technical terminology, we would just have to you know, use the comments with that terminology in our training data. And then obviously we'd want to measure how what the model performance is with things like precision and recall primarily. We don't really use model accuracy because that's a very kind of misleading term. So we'll typically, for this, especially for classification, we focus on precision, recall, and F1.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any last questions? Otherwise, what we'll do is, well, first of all, Duane, thank you so much. This has been incredibly informing and exciting, actually, to see this kind of stuff, right? This shows where you can go with really good big data and analytics. So appreciate your taking the time to talk about it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe, Roger, maybe one more quick comment, since people had a lot of questions about how the back-end pipeline process works. You know, one of the things is that it's really easy for us to make this work for a different industry or a different, you know, so the only thing we really have to change is the training data for the classification algorithm, right? So we've been able to take this back-end process and we were able to use it for the grocery industry, for a leading grocery retailer. We've also been able to do it for the hotel, right? Obviously, you know, hotels, groceries, and restaurants are going to have very different topics. But once we get those specific to the industry, then it's easy to reuse the rest of the solution.
Very cool. All right. So what I want to do now is to try something that we're able to do very easily in the in-person, which is to actually be able to network a little bit. So I'm going to take advantage of breakout rooms. And what I'd like to do is I've got a breakout room for learn about Wavicle. I've got another one with talk with the speaker, and Calvin will be with you, Duane, and you'll be able to go into more technical details in that room if people want to get a little bit more messy with the details. And what I'll do is I'll stay in the main room and kind of answer questions about the group. If people have suggestions for speakers or want to ask questions about what's going on with the group, I'll do that. But if people want to break out, that would be good. So if you go to the breakout room, you should be able to click on and move into a specific breakout room. Okay. And if people are having trouble doing that and want to, I can assign people to breakout rooms as well. And then when you're done or want to move to a different breakout room or just back to the main, you can leave the breakout room. And what I'll do now is open up the rooms and people can go there or stay here and then they can move around and just let me know how it goes. I'm trying to experiment with this, see if we can make this even a more interesting experience. So here we go.